We are recording. So first, I'd just like to pass it over to Michelle to introduce herself.
Thank you so much, Julia. Hi, everyone. It's so good to see you. I'm Michelle Copeland. I'm the CEO of BB Camp. And honestly, it's been my honor and my privilege to have done this job now for going on 25 years. I'm super excited about this summer. It's going to be so incredible. And our team is so prepared to ensure that all of our kids are ready for really a fun and meaningful summer experience. Thank you for being here. Chanel, do you want to jump on in?
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. My name is Chanel Bordeaux. I am the Communications and Youth Services Manager. And you'll be hearing from me quite a lot this summer, and I'll be on the other end of the phone and the emails throughout your campus time with us. And I will pass it over to Ben.
Everybody, I'm Ben Charlton. I am back as the overnight camp director. I'm really excited for my sixth summer in that role. And can't wait to meet all of your campers pretty soon. And I'm going to pass it over to Laura. And before I do, Laura, I just also want to make a big thanks to everyone here's. JFCS has been really, really outstanding as a partner to us so far. And we're really excited to join together and see what Laura has put together for us. So Laura, I'll pass it to you.
Thanks, Ben, and welcome everybody. My name is Laura Cohen, and as Ben noted, I am with Jewish Family and Child Service. I am the child and family clinician. I've been a social worker for over 30 years. I've done everything that you can imagine as a social worker. I've worked in a Jewish day school. I worked in juvenile justice. I've worked in health centers. I've worked with crisis services. I've worked with people who were houseless. And the last probably 15 years of my career, I've really focused on the intersection of criminal justice and mental illness. I will say that I joined JFCS about 2.5 months ago, and this was the first opportunity that was presented to me even before I accepted the job. So I'm very excited to be a part of this today, and thank you all. I will say that I am also a former Jewish camper from Olansang Ruby Union Institute, which is one of the URJ camps in the Midwest. And I'm also the mom of 2 adult kids who went to Jewish camp, although in Texas. Before we really get started, I just wanted to take just a moment to acknowledge what happened in Texas on Tuesday. It's really unimaginable. And I know this has been a hard week for everybody, but we just felt like we needed to at least acknowledge that before we could move forward. And with that, I'm gonna pass it back over to Michelle, and she's gonna just say a couple of words and then we'll get started.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Laura. BB Camp safety and security is one of our very top priorities. We know that unless people feel safe and secure at camp, learning, growth, and fun just can't take place. So considering all that has happened in our world, we know that safety and security is the foremost of many of our thoughts. I just wanted to share with you that our Security and Emergency Management Committee is working diligently on a wide variety of efforts that we're putting in place, of course, for this summer, but security has been at top of our priority for many, many years. Unfortunately, I can't share all those details because security experts ask us not to, but I can reassure you that safety and security is really, again, top of our mind, and we will ensure that our kids are safe and secure and have really a wonderful experience at camp. Laura, right back to you.
Thanks so much, Michelle.
Yes.
Just on a last note, I did send Chanel a couple of links to resources for families to be able to talk about these really challenging topics with kids. So if you want to take a look at those, you are welcome to do that, but no pressure to do so. Okay, now I'm going to ask everybody to be super patient with me. Zoom is not my favorite, but I'm going to do it anyways. I am going to share my screen, and even though we practiced like a minute ago, I bet that this is going to be a challenge. No, it's going to be perfect. Nope, this one. Okay, so can somebody just give me a thumbs up that you can see okay, great, fantastic. Because on this format, you can't really see anything once you share your screen, which is a little disconcerting. In any case, welcome to all of you who are just joining us. This is the joint presentation between BB Camp and Jewish Family Child Service, and the title is Shooing Away Sleep-Away Fears, a Summer Camp Toolkit. I'm going to just tell you a couple of housekeeping things. There will be times that I may ask a question of this group, and I know on Zoom, it feels sometimes like when somebody asks a question, it's kind of rhetorical, it just kind of hangs out there. And that's fine. But it's so much more interesting when parents and kids, if they're listening, can kind of chime in. So if there are a couple of brave parents out there, when I kind of ask an open-ended question, if somebody can just unmute themselves and answer, that would be great, because then you don't have to listen to me for like the next hour. Okay, I am going to move to the next slide. You know, we get very focused, and I'm sure BB Camp has probably sent you all packing lists that are comprehensive. Make sure that you've got, you know, your kids got a toothbrush and a sleeping bag and, you know, all the bug spray, all the things that you need for camp. And that's super important. But there's some other really important things that we also want to be mindful of as we're packing our kids' duffel kits and duffel bags. And some of that is really around packing an emotional tool chest. And so that's what we're really here to talk about today. I will say that if you're like most parents, there may be some of you that have some mixed feelings about sending your kid to camp. You know, it sounded really great when you did it, and maybe you have older kids and maybe you yourself were a camper and you remember how much fun it was. Even with that, and even with the excitement around it, some parents can still have some feelings around like, is this the really right thing? Are they going to be able to manage themselves? And so that's kind of what we're here to really talk about today. As I mentioned earlier, I'm the mother of 2 grown kids, and when my son was 7, I sent him away to 3 weeks of overnight camp, and I sent him with a big Foot Locker. He came back with everything exactly in place except for the very most top layer of clothes that I had sent. And when I said to him, Elliot, like, did you wear any of these things? And he said, no, I just wear the same thing every day. So I'm going to fast forward to he's 27 now. He knows how to change his clothes. He knows how to wash his socks. Kids figure it out. And so even if you have some angst around like, is my child going to be able to do this? We want to let you know that, yes, they will be able to do it. And you see lots of faces on the screen that are going to be there to help support them during that time. Okay. So why is sending your kid to camp important? There are a lot of reasons. The biggest one is really that it pushes them and it pushes us a little bit out of our comfort zone. Anytime that we challenge our kids to do things that are a little bit out of their comfort zone, they learn new things. They grow to a new comfort level and their confidence grows. And that helps them gain a sense of mastery, which is really important as kids are developing. What we know from brain research is that when we grow from any kind of experience, camp, school, whatever, our brains file that away as a really positive memory. And so when kids go to summer camp, they experience some of the greatest maturation of their lives, and they often return home stronger, healthier, and definitely more independent. So what are some of the things that you can do to help prepare your child for their first overnight camp experience? So one of the things that's really helpful is to ask your child, what are they excited about? What are they imagining being something that's really fun about camp? Is it that they're going to learn how to swim? Is it that they're going to do arts and crafts? Are they excited about being in the talent show? Get them to really focus on the positives and remind them, if they can't come up with them themselves, that there are a lot of positives that you also think that they're going to get from going to camp. Things like increasing their ability to play a sport or refine their artistic skills or make new friends, but especially establishing a sense of autonomy. And that's a lot of big words, but you can explain to your kids that part of the excitement of going to camp is that they get to be kind of a little bit on their own with definitely a lot of support around them, but they're not going to have mom and dad telling them it's time for bed, it's time to wake up. They'll have a camp counselor doing that. And eventually that they will learn that there are lots of other people that can really help to support them. Some kids that I've talked to in my own practice have never gone away to sleepaway camp, and that's fine. One of the great things that parents can do to help their kids prepare, if you haven't already done this, is to schedule some sleepovers. That's really helpful for a child to know and again, feel that sense of mastery, that they can be away from their home, their bed, their pet, their siblings, their mom, their dad, whoever it is that's important to them, and still make it through the night and sort of come out unscathed. So that's something that's a big help. If you haven't already tried that, that might be something to do. And then lastly, it's really important to ask your kids what they're kind of concerned about, so that you can practice with them some problem solving skills. And here's the secret sauce of the whole thing. It's really important for us parents to not dismiss what our kids' concerns are. It's really important that we listen to them and reflect back what we hear them saying, and then check in with them to make sure that we got it right. I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, but sometimes we worry that when things feel scary, that talking about it is going to make it worse and that it's going to make it come true. And what we know is that really helping our kids to identify and articulate their concerns ahead of time, not suggesting what they might be worried about, not offering leading questions, but really giving them a sense of, the ability and the space to be able to talk about some things that they might be worried about, is a great way to kind of get them to be thinking about how they might resolve some of these problems. Okay, hold on, let me get to my screen here. Sorry, there's my screen. Okay, so a couple of other ways to help them. I just mentioned problem solving. So problem solving, we all do this every day as adults. We do this in our everyday lives. Probably today you've already problem solved 50 different issues that have arisen. What's really important with kids, especially in this instance, is to help them problem solve. So not for us to say, here's the problem, here's what I think you need to do about it, but to really elicit a sense from them of, what do you think you might want to do? What do you think would help you in that situation? And one of the great ways of sort of addressing that is through role play. Now, I know as adults, we all go to trainings, and whenever they say the word role play, everybody kind of rolls their eyes and they look down and they hope nobody's going to call on them. But the truth is that kids are great at role playing because they're still really imaginative players, right? They love kind of getting into different roles. And so role playing is a great way for them to practice how they might want to manage some challenging situations. So while you're doing that, and they come up with all these like challenging things that they may be worried about, one thing that's also really important is for you to remind them and really emphasize their strengths. For example, if a child is really nervous about playing team sports, I know I was as a kid, you can point out that they are always willing to cheer on their teammates, or remind them that they have really great artistic skills, or they're a really good friend, or whatever their strengths and skills are. Another important thing that you can do is remind them that there are so many people there at camp that are going to be available to them, and that if they feel like they need some extra support, that there's a whole group of people there, counselors, unit heads, song leaders, camp directors, all kinds of people that are there to really help them. And these counselors, as Michelle noted earlier, these counselors are so trained and they're so prepared for this summer. They've been spending a lot of time really thinking through all the different scenarios and issues that that come up for kids at camp. And so they've been really practicing themselves, and they're ready. I will also say that another really important part about reminding your kids that they can always seek support is that that's a really great role modeling technique that we as parents often try to do for our kids, right? We want them to know that it's okay to ask for help. We have to ask for help sometimes, and that's a really important lesson for them to practice. And lastly, the goodbye. So one thing that you might want to consider is practicing what that goodbye might look like before it actually happens. You could do that with a sleepover. You could do it before it's time to go to bed, but kind of practicing what that might look like and feel like. And maybe there's certain things that your kid wants you to say. Maybe there are things they don't want you to say. That's a great time to kind of really have that conversation. Another thing that I will say that we do in our family, we call them fast goodbyes. So even to this day, when my kids leave me or when I leave them, we know it's coming and we're all a little bit sad about it. And so we do a very fast goodbye. We even articulate fast goodbye. And that's sort of our cue, like, It's okay to be emotional, and we're going to just do this quickly and kind of move on. Now, I will say that, and I don't know if does BB Camp, do all the kids drive to camp, or is there a bus that takes them? I should have asked this ahead of time.
We have
Anyway.
a mix of busing and drop off at camp.
Great. So you're going to see some parents at the bus. Sometimes you're going to say goodbye to your child actually at the camp. And I'm just going to say this out loud. Some parents cry and some parents don't, and that's okay. One thing that I would just say is that if your kids see you cry, that it might make them a little sad. And while that's usually normally very okay, in this instance, that might be a little bit hard. So if there's any way that you're feeling that sense of emotion, do that quick goodbye and go sit in your car and cry it out. That way, your child doesn't worry somehow that this might be impacting you and that they're leaving you and that might make you really sad. So I'm going to pause for a minute and I'm going to turn to Chanel and see if there are any relevant questions in the chat that we want to address at this point.
Not at this moment, but just a reminder that if any questions come up, please do put them in the chat. And if you'd like to ask a question privately, you can send that directly to me at Chanel Bordeaux.
Thank you. So this is one of those times that I'm going to just ask a question, and it would be great if parents want to chime in and offer up some things, not necessarily that you think your child is going to be worried about, but just in general, what are things that kids might be worried about before they go to camp?
Not knowing anyone.
Not knowing anyone. Excellent. Thank you so much, Eve, for joining in.
Elizabeth in the chat wrote, worried about homesickness.
Yes, excellent. Some kids are worried about feeling homesick, and some kids are worried about feeling physically sick. Allergies, COVID. I mean, this has been quite a couple of years. So absolutely, those are big fears that I would imagine some kids have. Anything else?
I have one. My child is a little bit older and has a cell phone, and he's worried about not having a cell phone and being able to communicate if necessary.
Wow, excellent. That is a question, a comment that I wouldn't have even thought of like 10 years ago. So yeah. Thank you, Kelsey.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Anything else? So I'm going to say here in the Pacific Northwest, we don't get a lot of thunderstorms, and maybe at the coast, we don't get that many either. But I can tell you that for kids that grew up here that aren't used to hearing sort of scary sounding weather, that can be a little bit jarring. And I think, again, kind of in the vein of what we've been talking about is some kids worry about safety, just in general. So thank you all for sharing some of your thoughts. Now, if I can move my mouse over, which is being.
And Laura, we also have someone who mentioned that maybe, changing in front of other campers or just general privacy within the cabin.
Oh, such a good, thank you so much for whoever asked that. So one of the things that I would say before we even get to the moments of sadness is that, as we talked about a little bit, a few minutes ago before we started this part of the conversation, it's really helpful if you can ask your kids if they, and listen to them if they really do have any of these concerns, and really think through with them and troubleshoot with them before they go to camp. How do they think that they might feel? How might they manage that? Again, the emphasis being on asking them to do some of that really good problem solving. How can you help normalize it? I didn't have a cell phone when I was a camper, and so that wasn't an issue for me. But for kids that might be, worried about feeling far away from home, is a parent who's gone to camp or college or away or abroad or whatever, that may be an opportunity for you to help normalize it and say, you know what, when I was your age, I also felt X, Y, and Z, and here's what I did. Giving a kid a plan and having a plan that's in place can be a great source of comfort for kids. As well as giving them the space to be able to actually name it and talk through it. So thank you all for thinking about that. Okay, so this slide, you can see I've titled it Moments of Sadness, and I'm going to say that I sat in on a really interesting presentation last week maybe, that was about Jewish camps. And they mentioned, and they really acknowledged that they no longer try to call it homesick, because that sort of connotates a pathology. It denotes a sense of like a sickness, and that it sounds like when we think of getting sick, it sounds like it could last for days, or I mean, look at COVID, people were sick for weeks. So they have a new term for it, and they call it moments of sadness. And I have to say, when I first heard it, I was like, huh, that's really interesting. But I have to say, the more I thought about it, the more it really kind of resonated with me, because I think the idea of these are just passing moments. Homesickness doesn't last forever for most kids. In fact, about 90% of kids who go away to camp experience some level of these moments of sadness, of homesickness. It is a natural response. It's a natural response for any kid when they are separated from a familiar environment. And we all know that as adults, we often can experience that as well when we are separated from places or people that we love, and we might have those feelings. So the piece that I really just want to kind of the sort of centerpiece of this is that these moments of sadness, they're normal and they are short term. And so it's really a good thing to kind of help our kids understand that they can be having a great time at camp, and then suddenly just this little wave of sadness may come over them, and that's okay. It will go away because there's so much going on at camp. And we know that if 90% of kids experience these moments of sadness, that it cannot be that terrible, because most of those kids end up coming back to camp. And they look forward to coming back to camp. And so I'm hoping that as we're talking about this, that this helps put your mind at ease, so that when you're talking to your kids, you can kind of help put their mind at ease. So let's talk a little bit about how we can minimize some of those moments of sadness before camp starts. And you can see I've got some talking points here. The first thing is to really talk with your child about it, to name it, to allow them the space to be able to say, yep, I'm actually a little bit worried that I'm gonna feel like I miss you, or I miss my bed, or I miss my whatever. Talking about these things does not make them happen, and it doesn't make them worse. If anything, it really enables a child to be able to have a good opportunity to think about how they might address it, and actually how they might feel with it. So kids are pretty good at predicting how strong their feelings might be. And so really the best thing that you can do kind of right off the bat is to give them the space to talk about it. We talked a little bit about normalizing it. So I'm going to just say this, that some kids may experience these moments of sadness and some may not, and that is okay. I will tell you that when my daughter, who is now 25, when I sent her to camp for the first year, I wrote her one of those camp notes every day. Every day I wrote one. And when she came home, I unpacked her stuff and I found every single note unopened. And I said, Lily, did you not want to read these? And she's like, oh, I thought I would save them for when I got home. She did not need them, and that was fine. But that told me that, she was so enjoying herself that even if she had those moments of sadness, she just was able to sail right through them. So as I said before, normalizing feelings, whether it's about worries about somebody might not like me, or worries about I might feel like I really miss home, the more we can normalize those, the better it is. The more we can allow our kids to talk about it, the better it is. And again, to remind them that even though they may have those feelings, they still are going to have a great time at camp, and they may be having a great time and still have those feelings, and that is okay. We're going to talk a little bit about some ways that you can help them practice ahead of time and help them think about things to do ahead of time. But I just want to pause for a second and see if there are any questions about moments of sadness.
No questions at the moment. We can keep on going.
Okay, wow, this is such a smart group. I don't know, you probably all know the answers. So here's something that's really significant, and that is that the majority of those moments of sadness occur mostly at night. So what that means is that there are things that you can do right now, again, to help prepare your child for these moments that might be happening at night. Number one, having a nighttime ritual is really helpful. When my kids were little, we did a thing where we would all kind of look up at the sky and see the moon and the stars. And my kids knew that when they saw the moon and stars at camp, that I was looking at the same moon and stars that they were, just in a different place. Some people like to say the Shema with their kids before they go to bed. That's a really lovely ritual. Having your child give themselves a hug before they go to bed, another ritual. Something that is meaningful, not to you as the parent, but to the child. And so this is a really lovely opportunity to really create something together, something that's going to be meaningful to them, that you can practice with them and that they can practice before they go to camp. The second idea to consider is bringing a small comfort object. So when we think of kids, we think of transitional objects. When they're really little, we think of blankets, we think of a teddy bear, a stuffed animal, a pacifier, something that they have imbued some sense of a parent into that object. And when they carry that around with them, they feel their parents' love. It's a wonderful thing, and it doesn't end when kids are going to camp. So asking them to, if this is something they want to do, and again, they don't have to, but if they can identify a small object that they can hold and that they can feel connected to you, that's lovely, that they can take out at night when those moments of sadness may arise a little bit more. And again, not to forget that there are lots of counselors who are very well versed in how to help kids manage some of those moments. Okay. So now I'm going to ask a question again, and this is, you can share if you want to, and I will be as patient as I can without keeping everybody too long. But if you would be willing to share a time when you had a moment of sadness, whether it was when you were at camp or at college or on a trip, or maybe when your other kids went to camp, what did you find helped your child or yourself? Any brave souls out there? You can put it in the chat.
I, at camp and at college, called home a lot, which I know is not going to be an option.
Okay. Thank you. You're right. I'm looking to the BB camp people. I'm guessing that is not an option. But that's where distraction can be really helpful. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. Anybody else want to be brave like Eve? Okay, we will move on.
Laura, I can share real quick.
Yeah. Oh, please, Ben. Yes.
Kelsey, you were Kelsey,
Yeah, I was on mute. Sorry about that.
Kelsey,
Do you want me to go? Is that okay?
please.
Yes.
Okay. When I was a camper, my moments of sadness were few and far between, but when I did have them, I would look at the photo. I'd bring photographs of my family members with me and put them up by my bed or, whatever. And I remember like my mom or my dad, one of them wrote me a note before I left, so I could always pull it out and read it and look at their photos.
Beautiful. Thank you, Kelsey.
Yeah.
Appreciate your bravery.
And
did you? Yeah.
So you feel free to tell your campers. So as I experienced moments of sadness at camp, even in my current age and all of my years there. And I'll say that for me, like writing letters or just journaling, but writing, the act of writing, for me is really, really helpful.
Thank you, Ben. I really appreciate everybody's bravery here and patience as I figure out how to get my mouse to my other monitor. There we go. Okay. So here's some things that you can work with your kids on ahead of time when they might experience moments of sadness. And some of them you already actually just pointed out, so that's beautiful. The first thing is do something fun. Where is there a more fun place in this world than camp? And I'm going to say BB camp especially, right? There's so many things to do at camp, and there's activities, there's friends, all of that makes a huge difference. And so really, again, helping your kids remember there are so many fun things to do at camp. And when you start to feel that little sense of sadness creep in, do something. Go do something fun, maybe even something fun that you couldn't do at home. The second thing is distraction. And I'm a huge proponent of this. That's what I was kind of saying before. Distract yourself until that feeling is past. So helping your kids know that, again, these are moments. They're not hours, they're not days, they're not weeks. They're little moments. And that oftentimes when we can remind ourselves of something else, we can talk about what that might look like, but that's a really great way to kind of help those fleeting moments just go by when they sort of creep in. I think, was it Kelsey who said this about writing letters, but doing something that feels closer to home, right? So writing letters to family, reading letters that come from family, looking at pictures, go ahead and grab that comfort object. All of those things have helped kids feel better while they're at camp. Think about all the good things about being at camp. So what we know from research is that when we can shift our mind a little bit and be optimistic and positive, it actually has a very strong impact on our mood. And so if you can remind your child to think about all the cool things that they can do at camp that they can't do at home, like stay up late, they get special snacks, they have lots more freedom, they have lots more independence, that if they can kind of focus on that instead of that moment of sadness, that thinking about those good things will actually help change their mood. Another thing that you can help your kids do is remind them that camp isn't really that long. I know this sounds sort of counterintuitive to what I just said, but 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, even 7 weeks isn't really that long when you compare it to school, which is like 40 weeks, right? So remembering that camp isn't forever, that it's a short time, and that they're having a great time can really make a huge difference. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but there are so many people on this call and way more people when your kids get to camp who will be there to help them feel better, right? So there are more people at camp to, support your kids than there really is probably anywhere else. So if you can remind your kids, talk to your counselor, your unit head, Julia, whoever it is that, that is there and available, their whole job is to make your child's experience at camp super fun and super successful. And that can really help with sort of those moments of sadness. And then finally, and we all live in Portland, so everybody's very into, healthy breathing and healthy mindfulness. And I would just say that there are a couple of really quick and easy tricks that kids can do when they're feeling especially sad. One of them is belly breathing, where literally you can teach your child that if they don't already know how to do this, but to put their hands on their bellies and watch their stomachs go in and out, taking really deep breaths. That helps slow down our whole system, and that can sometimes help those feelings pass. And then finally, any kind of mindfulness strategy that your kids know and love. I often use with the kids that I work with here at JFCS, the I Spy game. So, I spy a tree, it's green, it smells fresh, it has smooth leaves. And again, really focusing on being in the present, that helps pull their kids out of their emotional brain and brings a sense of calm by sort of turning their awareness to things outside of their own mind. So bottom line is that these are all great strategies. The important thing is to talk about them and practice them before your kids go to camp, and so that they have a whole duffel bag full of things that they can do if those feelings should occur. Okay, so here's a big one. And this is another question I'm going to ask rhetorically. Well, not rhetorically, but I'm going to just ask if anybody's brave enough to throw something out there or put it in the chat. So what should you do if your child asks you if you will pick them up early? I don't know if any other parent has experienced this, but I know some of the parents that I've worked with here at JFCS have indicated that this is something that they grapple with. And so I just wanted to kind of put this out there that this is a possibility. Anybody have any thoughts about that?
I do. I have a thought.
Go, Kelsey, do it.
Well, my son is older, and it's his first year going to sleepaway camp and BB camp. But I have told him that I you know, if something happens, I will always come pick him up early. But I say that knowing that it's just something that he can remember, and it will give him some, you know, assurance. And because I tell him that, I will never need to pick him up early, yeah, absent some emergency, if that makes sense. But that works for my child specifically, may not work for younger children.
Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that.
Mhm.
Does anybody else want to throw anything out there? Okay.
Laura, I'm happy to jump in.
Oh, please, yes.
In my experience for doing this job for so many years, parents that create the opportunity for children to come home, those children end up not being able to be successful, and they go home because they set up a framework that says that it's acceptable to not get through these kind of challenging, hard milestone times for children. And so my suggestion is do everything you can to set your child up for success and not create a framework that they're going to come home, because it's really, really hard on the child, really hard.
Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate that. And I'm going to say that, you know, obviously everybody works a little bit differently. My suggestion, similar to Michelle's, is to try not to make any deals with your kids, right? Because then we're sort of stuck. And I'm glad, Kelsey, that for your situation that you feel like that is not going to be the case. That may not be the situation for other folks. So one thing that you might want to just kind of throw out there is something like this. You sound like you're a little nervous about going to camp. It's normal to feel nervous. Just remember that even if you do miss home, you'll know what to think and what to do to make things better. And you'll have lots of people who can help you through those feelings. So even though you might have some of those feelings, I think you're going to have a great time at camp. And that way you're not kind of setting the child up, as Michelle noted, for any sort of deal that you either have to follow through on or not follow through on. And it, at the end of the day, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit, but we want our kids to be successful because this is a really maturing process. And so I just want to kind of throw that out there. I'm going to also say that this is a really hard conversation to have, right? And we all go in thinking we're going to be these like super parents and we know exactly what to say because we read it in a magazine or we heard some expert say it. But the truth is, when our child looks at us with those sweet eyes and they say, "Oh, but please, won't you come get me? Please, mommy, please, please, please." So it's important that we have sort of our own conversation within ourselves before we do that, right? So what are some of the things that you feel like might be helpful for you or for another parent? Doesn't have to be you specifically, or things that you've tried when you've had these conversations to kind of keep you from going down that path of let's make a deal. You can put it in the chat, you can take yourself off mute, or you could just listen to me talk.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Michelle. So one of the things that I do is something I just did today. One of my kids wanted to come home from school because a thing in his eye. He had a problem. And so I went to the school, I went to PJA and said, let me see. And I helped him out and it was fine. And he didn't really want to go back home. He wanted to go home. He didn't want to go back to school. And I said, well, why don't you, take a couple of deep breaths and go back to the class. And if you really, really want me to pick you up, why don't you wait, a little, and then I'll come back and pick you up. So kind of like delaying it so that he could find a way to calm himself and then really think about, do I really want to do that? So with camp. Anyway.
Beautiful. Thank you, Michelle. Appreciate that. Okay. Well, I'm just going to go ahead because I know we want to leave some time for you all to ask questions, especially of the BB Camp staff. But
I guess I have a quick comment. So mine is the exact opposite. I'm fearful that my son won't want to come home from camp. Like I'm still learning a lot from this, but I'm not afraid that he's going to miss us at all. I'm still going to do all of these things because they're wonderful. But yeah, is there any tips, are there any tips for helping him leave camp to come back home? We have a great family, but he's just really excited about camp.
I mean, I think that is tremendous. And that's wonderful that he's so excited and wants to go. I will let Michelle, because I see she's unmuted herself. I want to see if she wants to say anything about maybe other kids have had this experience, but I just want to thank you for offering that up.
I think that's so beautiful. Thank you so much. I was actually asked Ben if you can talk about how we close down the session so that kids have opportunity to say their goodbyes properly and be ready to go transition back to home. That would be great.
Absolutely. So like one tradition we have at camp, one of our closing ritual, like Michelle said, is we do a closing campfire at the end of the session, and as part of that, the all the staff, so every specialist at camp, every counselor, all the kind of grown-ups at camp are lined up between the campfire and the dining hall, and every camper gets to walk through that entire line of staff and stop how often or how not often they would like to on their way up to the dining hall to have time to say goodbye individually to each staff member. And then with their cabins, when they go back to their cabin, they do a similar thing with their own cabin group. And I think, also just to connect, like Laura, what you're teaching, back to Sarah, you're kind of the other side of that coin. I think those moments of sadness are real on both sides, right? And these tools that we're talking about right now can absolutely be used if your child comes home and is, camp sick or is having a moment of sadness at home. And it's, let's think about the positives of camp, or let's think about when we're going to go back and all that other stuff. And, it's a good problem to have, but, certainly one that, there are supports and strategies for.
Wow, I loved listening to you say that, Ben. That was beautiful. Kelsey, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I kind of just have a question, and this might not be the appropriate place to ask it, but I'm just going to throw it out there. I know when I was a camper, I didn't want to leave, and I had camp sickness. But one of the things that helped me was exchanging contact information with my friends that I made. And I remember, like, specifically, I brought an address book, and everybody, I passed it around to all my friends, and they all wrote their address, and we made plans before we left camp to keep in touch afterwards. So I don't know I don't know if that's done these days. I don't know if you guys have like a, contact list or something. I'm curious to know.
So a lot of the kids will do that on their own, and staff will help. But also, once campers get home, feel free to absolutely email myself or really anyone on this team who's here right now, and we're happy to kind of send you different contacts and make those connections happen so that those camp friendships can exist year round and lifelong.
Thank you.
Wow, this is such a beautiful conversation. But I'm gonna keep moving ahead so that we can get through this part of the presentation, and then folks can ask questions if they have any at the end. Sort of what we've been talking about. How do you prepare for having this conversation so that you don't end up playing let's make a deal? Really important to decide in advance what you're going to do, to have a backup plan. So again, some kids do end up having some really significant homesick issues where they are incessantly crying and they can't eat and they can't sleep for days on end. And if that should happen, I think it is important to be thinking about, how do you contact this, camp staff, and how can you kind of work with them around that? And then finally, again, the resisting the urge to offer an immediate solution. Sometimes as parents, we feel like we have to, or as adults, we sometimes have to feel like we know right in that moment what the answer is. And it's okay to say, you know what, I need to think about that for a minute. That is okay to do. Really eliciting the ideas from your kids is still going to be the most effective thing, far more effective than anything that I suggest. Okay, last few things. Really important to think about these moments of sadness. They're actually a skill that will help your child the next time they're away from home. So it's not just these 2 weeks or 3 weeks at their first camp session. This is a lifelong lesson that really will help them. Once children really learn that they can, feel this feeling that's uncomfortable and practice coping with it, and that they can survive a brief separation, their confidence about future separations really skyrockets. And so even though these moments are really hard to get through or even think about as parents, they actually really help our kids gain independence. And because of that independence and knowing that they can do things on their own and have a sense of mastery, it helps their self-confidence increase and shapes really their attitudes about themselves. When Michelle Copeland was talking a little bit earlier about kids who end up going home from camp early, sometimes those kids end up with a feeling like they didn't succeed, like I hate the word failed, but like that they didn't make it. And that's a really hard feeling for a kid to sit with. I mean, it's really hard to undo that. So again, I think if you sort of think of like experiencing those moments of sadness as sort of like exercise, those initial bouts actually help you get past them. And it's a little like exercise, like it's hard at the beginning, but the more you do it, the stronger it makes you. So I want to move ahead because I know we are really nearing the end here. We talked a little bit about this sort of, so there's kids who experience missing home, and sometimes parents experience missing kids. And so it's really important for us as parents to be able to recognize that this is a thing. Even though sometimes we may really enjoy that we don't have carpool and we don't have kids that we have to entertain and bedtimes and bath times and all of that, sometimes that freedom can feel really empty. And so it's really important for you as parents that you kind of think about how you might get through this. I won't ask the question about how you've done this in the past or what you think you might want to do, but I'm just going to tell you here a couple things that you might want to consider. You may want to plan ahead. Think about how you're going to spend those first few days without your child when your house feels really empty. Sometimes the smallest kids have the biggest impact on our environment. And it's amazing when they're not there, how quiet and empty the house can feel. So knowing this in advance and thinking about how you are going to adjust and address that is super helpful. Talking with other camp parents, there are lots of great resources here on this call, the other parents who have been through this. And so sometimes asking them or neighbors or family how they've managed when their kids went to camp. Just like we talked about with our kids, sometimes staying busy, being distracted, that's a really great short-term way when that sort of icky feeling comes and until it passes. And then finally, reminding yourself that this is truly a gift that you are giving your child. Going to camp is wonderful in so many ways. And as we've talked about, independence is a really important part of that. All right, here's my last slide. Couple of final thoughts, do's and don'ts. Do talk to your child about camp in a confident and positive manner. Camp is fun. Having a confident and positive attitude is one of the best predictors of having a good time at camp. So again, really important that you talk about it in a fun, positive way. Don't engage in common pitfalls like early pickup deals. Do listen to your child and really listen to them when they tell you that they're worried about something. Also help them brainstorm how they might get past that. Do plan on figuring out what those first few days are going to look like for you. Are you going to, go out and meet some friends? Are you going to have dinner? Whatever. And then really important not to ignore your own emotional response. Anticipating and coping with your own feelings is really important. And then finally, and this is the most important, prepare yourself and your child for a really successful and transformative summer. This is a time that is really important for your child, and if there are other kids in the family who don't go to camp, this is your opportunity to spend time with them and devote quality time to them without feeling guilty. So last thing I'm going to just say is that you can just remember that your child will be home from camp before you know it, and they'll be excited about going back again next year. So with that, and this is our contact information. So I'm Laura and I'm with JFCS, and Julia, her contact information is down there as well. And I know she's probably shared that with you all before. And with that, I'm gonna put myself on mute and see if there are questions or comments, and we can kind of wrap things up.
Yeah, thank you so much, Laura. That was so informative. We really appreciate you helping out with that. So yeah, if y'all have any questions pertaining to Laura's presentation, or if you just have any general BB Camp questions, this is the time to ask. You can ask us in the chat and we'll answer, or you can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask on the screen. So yeah.
I'll ask a question. This is gonna be my daughter's first time in overnight camp. Certainly wanted to send her the last couple of years, but ran into something. Is there gonna be another, this has been helpful and interesting, this presentation, but I don't know anything about the logistics of this summer. Is there gonna be another kind of, I don't know, is there a web page to look at for that? Or is there gonna be another meeting where they tell us, show up at this place at this time and pack these things, that type of thing?
Yeah, so oh sorry, Ben, did you?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm not positive it's on the calendar yet. I think it is, but we're definitely gonna do another virtual town hall, just general, camp logistics before camp 100%. Then we also have upcoming in both Portland and Seattle, Pizza in the Park events. So next week we have Portland, East Side and West Side, Pizza in the Parks, and then in 2 weeks is up in Seattle. And in beyond all that, if you live somewhere else or those don't work, please email any one of us, myself, Julia, Chanel, Michelle, and we are more than happy to kind of talk through that. But yeah, we will definitely do at least one large Zoom before camp with an overall just camp logistics.
Great, thank you.
I have a couple of sort of general questions.
Great.
One that someone else already brought up, and I was like, yeah, so I circled it. Privacy concerns, and how that goes with a bunch of people in a cabin together.
Yeah, so communal living, we live communally at camp. We have some brand new cabins that are really spacious and nice, and usually we'll have anywhere from 10 to 15 campers in a cabin together, and then 3 or 4 adults, and we have our bathrooms connected to the cabins. So yeah, in terms of privacy, because it's communal living, that's a really common concern for kids. We have our bathrooms connected to our cabins, as I said before, so campers are welcome to, if they're uncomfortable changing in the communal space, they can use stalls in the bathrooms always. We also have individual showers that have curtains and also a space for changing right next to the showers. So we have spaces available before and after showering, and also to change in the middle of the day that are private in the cabin. So it's really up to the kid for what they're most comfortable with. They can change in the communal spaces or in a more private space.
My other question, thank you, I guess, and I actually have a few other questions for you, Julia, that I will ask, make an appointment and ask you. But I'm thinking some of these might pertain to other people. A sort of a worry that I have is sleep. Like my kids went to bed late 3 nights last week and they were insane. And I'm like, oh my God, camp, they're going to be going to bed late every night. Like how that sort of like dysregulation that happens when kids don't get as much sleep. How do you manage that?
Yeah, so actually, yeah, so it may seem at camp like your kid's not going to get a lot of sleep, but we actually do prioritize sleep a lot at camp. We try to give kids like 10 hours of sleep a night, depending on their age group. They'll usually start that bedtime process anytime between, or just between the hours of 8 and 10, depending on how old they are. And kids usually, we start our day around 8 a.m. So we give kids plenty of time to sleep. And we also have adults in the cabins throughout the night. So they aren't left unsupervised to socialize, or some kids keeping other kids up. For example, we always have an adult available there, making sure that kids are actually really going to sleep and winding down at the end of the day. Yeah. Sometimes parents hear stories about activities that we do called raids at camp, where kids have fun going to other kids' cabins at night. And in the minds of the kids, this is happening at like 3 a.m. for them, but in reality, it's happening at like 9 p.m. So kids are not doing activities in the middle of the night, even if to them, they think that they're up at the wee hours of the morning.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Go
A
ahead.
follow-up question? Okay, thank you. I'm just following up on the shower question. I know for Shabbat, everybody showers, and sounds like there are showers in every cabin now. Is that right? And okay, because before you'd have to go to the shower room and there was like 8 stalls, and when it was your cabin's turn. So about how many showers are in each cabin? And are they sort of like, I know you said that there's like there's privacy there. But I mean, how does that work like on Shabbat? Or do they just rotate, a couple kids from each cabin? I mean, I don't know. I'm assuming there's a couple showers.
Yeah, I believe that each individual cabin has 2 showers.
Okay.
And we also, there's designated time. There's time for kids to shower every day. So we definitely prioritize, hygiene and cleanliness. And yeah, they would just rotate through the campers and have a designated amount of time so that everyone has time to shower.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you so much. I see you have to log off. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you all. Have a great summer. It's going to be fantastic. Thanks, everybody.
So much.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you, Laura.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
We will stay on for a couple of more minutes, the BB Camp team, in case anyone has any more questions. But if you don't, thank you so much for coming. You can feel free to log off now. We're so excited to meet all of your kids at camp this summer. And please, if you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to reach out to me or any member of our team before camp.
Hi, Michelle. Can I ask one question? I'm going to make an appointment with you, and so I have some follow-up questions about some changes. I don't know what changes have happened at camp since I was a camper and staff, but I'm wondering. One of those changes is the 2-week session versus the 3-week session, and my son is signed up for the 2-week session, and I don't. How do you guys like logistically deal with that? And like, will he be coming in after the 3-week session campers have been there for a week and have already made friends, or does he come in?
It's the opposite. So we prioritize and like basically ensure that every camper who's going to be bunked together starts together. So that way everyone's there for, having agreements and getting to know you activities and, becoming friends together. And then after 2 weeks, the 2-week campers will depart and the 3-week campers will stay for an extra week of more camp fun.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Very helpful.
I'm so sorry. I have to run a child to her sport. So thank you all for coming tonight. I'm going to leave it in my team's very capable hands for any extra questions. Thank you so very much. Bye, you guys. See you all soon.
All right. Well, everyone has our phone numbers and our email addresses. And thank you, Julia, for making all this happen tonight. And we'll see everyone soon.
Wait, one more. I promise this is it.
Don't worry.
I promise. But others may have the same question. Do you guys still allow packages of food and then no food? Okay, because
we don't allow packages.
You don't allow packages anymore?
Correct.
Just letters?
Letters, yeah.
We allow packages in the case of if a kid forgets something important at home. You can, of course, if they forget their shampoo or something, you can send the shampoo over. But yeah, we don't have packages otherwise. Or for birthdays, we do allow birthday packages as well.
And if your child does forget something important, feel free to also reach out to us, directly, because it may be quicker for us just to get it for them too.
Mhm.
All that.
Thank you.
All right. Well, nice to see everybody. Thank you all for joining.
Thanks. Thanks so much. And please reach out and see y'all this summer. Bye.